when the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alz, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priess.
Hello, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Don Priess, and this is Love Conquers Alz. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Donald. How you doing?
I'm tired. How are you?
God, that's so coincidental. Because I'm exhausted.
Pushing through.
Huh?
I know. Oh my God. I know it. I mean,
why are we exhausted, Don?
We're exhausted because there's so many reasons. But one of the main reasons is we are just in full force going towards this documentary. You know, I know that you're living it 24/7. I'm living it 12/7 because the other 12 I'm working on my other job.
I know.
So,
I know. You might hear a cougar in my house, but it's not really a cougar. It's a 5-pound dog that sounds like a cougar. Just letting you know out there. Yeah.
Let me guess.
We're working on
Gidget.
Yes, Gidget, the diva cougar. So we're working on No Country for Old People. So if we don't remind you enough, but we're going to remind you again because we are doing something that we hope will create a lot of change. It's an expose, more or less, about our broken healthcare system, which I personally experienced last year for 6 months straight, and I had no idea how broken our system is and how it is affecting every aspect of it, and it's not just the patients or residents living in assisted living or long-term care or nursing homes. It's the doctors, it's the nurses, it's the providers, it's everybody that's involved in the industry of, and it really is an industry because it's run by corporations now, and it's run by people who have profit over, their goal is profit over people, which is incredibly tragic and the opposite of humane. And so we need to make this change. And so if I keep talking about it a lot, it's because it's very important, and it's because I didn't know. So, and I don't think unless you're in this business or unless you get pushed into somebody that needs care, and that's when you find out. And that at that point, it's a little bit too late. So that's why I'm hoping to take what I went through and share it with all of you, and let's prevent other people from suffering like my mom did last year. So that's what we're doing. And through this project, like every tough road brings you more experience and closer to the path that you should be on. And that's why I really believe that, and that's why I'm meeting such extraordinary people. Every single path, like my mom and the girl. Remember, Don? We met so many great people.
It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. You're
really
kind of like Dorothy, and just meeting all these magical people along the way. Better, maybe a little better than scarecrows and tin men, but
I like the
it's
scarecrow.
really it's a great journey with the scarecrow, and he had a brain in the long run, so
that's
it's
the
all
thing.
good.
We all have it. We have heart, we have brain, we have courage, and we
Courage.
But we do. We really are. We can be really strong when we have to be, that's a great metaphor, Don. I like that you brought up the Wizard of Oz, because
you can use that.
We walk through life. We don't realize that we have the brains, we have the heart, and we have the courage to make change and do the right thing.
And that will lead us home, which is where the heart is.
Because there's no place like home.
Wow, let's go with a few more of these.
Anyway, I want to tell you, so jumping off of my rant, my ramble really, about meeting wonderful people. I met a wonderful soul, a soulmate really, this woman who's a doctor. How am I meeting all these amazing people and then doctors and who are so the amazing careers with triple licenses, and talk about motivation and resilience and fortitude and all that stuff. Wow. I'm just humbled to meet all these people. So will you introduce our guest? I'm excited to talk
I
to him.
will. Dr. MIRIAM ZYLBERGLAIT LISIGURSKI, or Dr. Z, was born in Peru, where she attended medical school and practiced medicine for almost 10 years. In 2011, she left her parents, her friends, and her job as an academic physician to come to the U.S. to be with the love of her life. Now, she's a triple board-certified physician in geriatrics, internal medicine, and obesity medicine with extensive clinical and academic experience. In 2021, she was selected by the American College of Physicians to be part of the National Wellness and Professional Fulfillment Committee, and in 2022, she joined the Creators Institute at Georgetown University to write her first book about well-being and growth. The 3G Cycle of Life, The Secrets of Achieving Joy, Meaning, and Well-Being is an introspective journey that gave her the opportunity to heal, create new friendships, find her purpose, help others, and create a meaningful impact. It includes more than 30 experts, personal and professional experiences, evidence-based data, and Dr. Z's insights and stories. She has 2 awesome sons, a caring husband, a supportive family, and although she is caregiving long distance for her mother, who was recently diagnosed with dementia, her dream is to help others achieve lives full of joy, meaning, and well-being. So, please welcome the very irrepressible MIRIAM ZYLBERGLAIT LISIGURSKI, MD. Hello.
Hello, Dr. Z.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
So fun to have you, and I'm just I love everything you do. I'm just so impressed with you, and you have a body of work that's just such a role model for so many people. And I think I've always, my company is Go Girl Media, and you're such a go girl. You really are. I don't need to repeat it, right?
Well, for me, I am very impressed by you, and I love the things that you are doing, and I am so grateful of having the opportunity to be part of your life and part of your project. So I feel like this is mutual. So
Wonderful.
I'm
that's how
happy
it
that
should
we
be.
met.
Me too. It's really extraordinary, when people have to. We don't realize. It's difficult enough to go through med school, right, and be licensed. It's difficult, to, as a woman, let's face it. I don't know if it's the same in Peru, but
Yes.
here, right, and so you have all these achievements, and then you fall in love, right, and then you decide to pick up yourself and leave this country that everything about it, including your degrees and whatever you pick up and come and start your whole life over again, more or less, in a new country without the language. You had to learn it on the trot. So, and I know this is Love Conquers Alz, but I just think that the way that MIRIAM has navigated her life is the way that we should with any kind of challenge, which is what I did with my mom, is leaning into it, and then you find the joy, which is, so I mean, tell us. It can't be that easy. So tell us a little bit how you got here. Like, how did you pick yourself up again, and how did you learn the language so quickly? Yeah.
So I used to read in English. All the materials that I used to review in Peru were in English. And I had this basic, hello, bye, how are you doing, and stuff like that, but nothing more than that. So I learned with my husband a little, and then I was hired to do research. And in my office, I was only interacting with 2 medical students from India that were not able to speak Spanish, and this is in Miami. So in Miami it was very difficult to only speak English, except that you sit me with someone from India. So they not only became very good friends of mine, but really they helped me to improve my English. And I feel like my patients were very, very kind also, and my colleagues and my, my mentors. It's a little to, jump into the pool knowing that people will not be judging you, but will be helping you. And suddenly you are speaking English. Of course, I can even recognize when I make a mistake, and I'm like in retrospective, like, I said something wrong right now. Too late. And Grammarly is wonderful. I'm doing some advertising without intention.
We all benefit from Grammarly.
But let's say that makes me look more professional now when I write. And yeah, the English probably was the less difficult part. The most emotional part, the most difficult part was to leave my parents. I was very close to them. They didn't want to join me in this trip, so they stayed there. Even I really tried. And it was scary also to start from zero my career, not knowing that I will be able to make it, because the percentage of people that applies to these residency programs and is able to go again and recover their careers is not super high, especially when you are older than the average. Was my case after 10 years of being a physician in my country. But I guess a little of luck, a little of pushing hard, and a lot of support. I had the support of my family, and I believe that's the reason why I am where I am right now.
I agree. That's amazing. So the other thing that interests me is that you have 3 different focuses, right? So you're an internal medicine, right?
Yes.
And then you have a geriatric focus, and then you have an obesity focus. Let's ask you why obesity? Because how do you fall into that?
Because they are not disconnected, they are absolutely connected. Internal medicine is just knowing how your body works in general. Geriatrics takes you to the next level where you see or learn how to apply this general knowledge in a more specific population, a population that is more frail, and adds to the combination the holistic approach where you don't only focus in livers and kidneys and bones, but where you see the cognition and the emotional aspect and the social aspect. That's the part that I totally adore about geriatrics, that we see patients as human beings. And obesity for me is a pandemic. It's affecting young and old population, and it's something that not only is preventable, but it's also treated if you do it correctly. And I should not be doing this for the elderly. Probably when we try to correct obesity in the elderly, we are doing this too late. It's something that is really prevention, and it's part of educating in appropriate lifestyles, which will prevent all of us to get to the elderly times, right? And to be sick. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Quality.
To have quality of life.
So there's a big sort of stigma about talking about obesity these days. Because I remember, just anecdotally, I had a friend who was, gorgeous, but always a larger gal. And, and she had she got to the point where she was like very, very militant about the fact that, it was okay to be the weight that she was. And it is, it's okay. You can choose what you want to do. But there was I remember having a discussion with her because I had mentioned that I had seen a family member who I hadn't seen for years who was quite large when I saw them, and I was worried about them, and she was very offended because she said that's such a bias and a stereotype that just because they're big that they're not healthy. But so how do you respond to that? Because I feel like it isn't healthy to be overweight. So and how do you deal with that in this sort of climate of politically correct?
So I feel like we cross the line when we are trying to be diverse and inclusive, which I consider myself that I am. I mean, being a woman, an immigrant, for sure I am part of minority, so I will be the number one on saying like we need to be diverse and inclusive. If not, I am affecting myself. But one thing is to be diverse and inclusive and respected with others, and the other is to cross the line when we are compromising our own health because we want to, set a precedent, or we want to establish something like, I have the right to. Yes, you have the right to everything, and we have the right to, or the obligation of respecting others when we don't cross certain lines, right? When we don't cross certain boundaries. And when someone that has a medical condition, because obesity is a medical condition, and that's the wrong perception, we transform obesity in the way that you look.
Right.
In how sexy you are, right? How nice you look for others, or your size. But obesity is not how you look. Obesity is a medical condition that reflects that your metabolism is not working well for some reason, and that will carry medical conditions as a consequence that will affect your quality of life, because you will live with back pain, knee pain, that will increase your risk of having diabetes, of having cardiac problems, of having cancer and strokes, and even dementia. So yes, I have the right to be green. I understand you want to be green, you want to be yellow, you want to be purple. I understand, but when you are trying to fight for your right of being green or yellow or whatever, are you compromising your own well-being?
Right. And are we putting out the wrong message? Are we putting out the wrong message? The message is, yes, to accept yourself, and you can make the choice if you want to compromise your health because that's what you want to do. That's okay. But it is a fact, like you said, there's a line, that when it becomes detrimental to your health. And so it's right to worry about someone that you love if they've crossed that line.
Yes, however, society created this monster. Mm-hmm. Society created this monster when we started to really stigmatize obesity, right? And we started to, okay, that person will not be invited to the party, and that person will not find a nice dress in the store. So we created in society an environment that is toxic. And what we are seeing right now is a reaction. Individuals that suffer from obesity are reacting and trying to defend themselves against the aggression, right, of the environment. Right. And I understand that. I guess that my point for them is do not put yourself in a situation that is dangerous just to make sure that you are respected. There are other ways where you can, reclaim the rights that you have to be treated with respect beyond how you look, beyond the color of your skin. This is different than when we talk about someone having an accent, like in my case, or being from one religion or other, or having one color of skin or the other. We are talking about, this is about your life, this is about your health. And I feel like we need to reassess what we are doing with obesity and the messages that we are sending, because the consequences are really tragic, and we will keep seeing them. We started now to see them, but what 10, 20 years from now, we will have a very high level of patients with disabilities, because the obesity will not kill you, will turn you into a disabled person, a person that is suffering, a person that is not able to work. And at that point, we as a community, as a society, we will suffer too.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, we have to define it. We have to define what obesity is, or what, because there is the physical, what we look and we see. And then there's some people who probably don't even look and they're probably health compromised and we don't know it. So how do we define that?
I love the question, and I was actually planning to answer to that when you asked. Yes, I feel like there's a big problem in how we define this. And yes, there are methods, of course, this very well-known BMI, that is the relationship between your height and your weight, which is kind of the standard, not necessarily appropriate for all the groups. For elderly, it's not appropriate. For people from China, for example, is not appropriate because of the characteristics of their body, right? So we cannot necessarily, we have to adapt the numbers that we use. It's not the same that we use in the United States. And then you have these bodybuilders, for example, where they have a very high BMI, that if you see the number, you will call them obese, and then you notice that fat percentage is very low. So we need to incorporate fat percentage and the circumference of your body, your abdomen, to incorporate extra data and really qualify someone as overweight, obese, or morbid obese. So that's number one. It's a little more fancy than what we do or what we know. But the second thing that I believe is even more important is that we need to understand that obesity is not the result of overeating, or not necessarily in all the cases. That with the advantage of more technology and genetic assessments and the ability to see receptors in the brain, we have been identifying that there are some conditions that, because of genetic reasons or because of malfunction of areas of our brain, condition individuals to or eat more because they cannot feel full, and they need to keep going, or to have problems with the metabolism, so even if they may not eat a lot, they will gain this weight. So we were judging people because they eat too much, they are too lazy, they do not exercise. But the truth is that we were being very unfair. We were just ignorant that there was a real medical condition, right, causing this, and we need to educate. Yes, conditions. Actually, yeah, it's plural, and we need to go back to the community and to educate them. So we reduce the bias, not just saying like, everybody has the right to look the way they want, because that's a very wrong message. Is yes, we need to be kind with people because it's the right thing, but because specifically it's this group is not lazy, is not eating a lot, they have a medical condition equal than hypertension or diabetes or cancer or anything else. So we won't go in front of someone with cancer and tell them like, oh, you look awful, or this is your fault.
But it's your fault, right? Yeah.
We should not go to someone that is obese and tell them, this is your fault, you look like this because you want. No, they don't want.
It's like alcoholism too. It's fine. It was before. It was always thought of as like, oh well, you're indulgent. You can't. Why don't you just quit? And and it's like, I don't have that predilection to be an alcoholic. I just wouldn't be. It's not in my genes. Whereas someone else, you can pick up and they can't. And like Dawn you have the Jethro syndrome. You never get full.
I can. Well, I don't. And
you don't.
And as I've gotten older, that doesn't benefit me much. But it is. It's just it's a condition. It's not. Look, there's always exceptions to the rules. There's some people who but in general, it's not. We think of obesity. We've been trained to think of it's because you overeat, and you have no self-control.
You're gluttonous. You're being a glutton.
It's a negative. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're bad. And it's not that.
I love that. I love that, to change the perception, because I think you're right. The pendulum had to swing very, as it does when we're trying to make change. You have to swing it all the way, big and wide, so people will will pay attention. And that's what we've done, right? So everyone is paying attention. That's why we see different bodies in ads now. We see that, and we are accepting of it. And I think now I love what you're saying, because now it is a good time to come back now. Because we did make a change in perception. Yeah, we went to the extreme, right? We went to the complete opposite. We need to go to this middle, healthy place. Yes, yeah. Where we will treat people with respect, because that's
what is correct, but we will also allow them to get to a condition or a situation where they are happy and healthy. And right, and I say happy and healthy for one reason, because obesity not only causes problems in your body, it's not something that will only give you diabetes or cancer or strokes, but also it's also related to depression, anxiety, isolation, high risk of suicide, and etc. If you are a victim of abuse continuously and bullying and rejection, you are really hurting the soul of someone because of something that probably they have not enough control. And we need as human beings to be a little more kind. We don't know when it will happen to us, and I'm saying obesity, but could be whatever. Anything. It's just a question of luck.
I think that's a great time to pivot into, geriatrics, because there's and I think, which will tie this into No Country for Old People and your mom who has dementia, and that area of medicine that is really underserved, in my opinion. And even geriatric doctors, many of them don't know they know a certain amount of what they've been taught. And then, unlike what you said in the beginning, that you take in the whole person, I don't think that is incorporated in every doctor that I met during my mother's journey. So I love to pivot into that and to say, how do we need to apply the same idea, the same paradigm that you're talking about for obesity, for people that are older, for people who have dementia, and then and the combination thereof, because that is the worst combination in terms of living in society.
I feel like we need to be kind in general. We need to be kind in an elevator, with the person that is asking you to push number 3. That should be the way that we manage ourselves in life. And right now, when everybody is suffering in some way, not only because of COVID, but because of the economy or whatever is happening in their own lives, being kind is just the little thing that we can do for others and for ourselves. That is free, and it's just a smile and like a tiny nice word to add. How are you doing? I wish you a good day. The end. And you maybe change the complete day for that person, free. In geriatrics, and I want to be careful on this, I don't think that geriatrics is the only specialty that should have or that has this concept of a holistic or comprehensive approach. I believe that in the majority of the cases, that's what we would like every specialty to have. Sure. Right? Every doctor should practice like that. I receive extra training or extra, I will say, encouragement to do so during my geriatric training. In Peru and also here in the US, for some reason that is part of the philosophy that is included, and you will see it also in palliative care, hospice. In many cases, we are seeing that transition also in the ICU, in intensive care unit. But it's not yet practiced all over. I would love internists to do it and primary cares in general to do it. But I don't blame them, and I don't judge them, and the reason is that the system is not allowing us to practice the way that we want. The fact that you are going to a physician office and you are not seeing this when they are treating you, not necessarily reflects that they don't know or they don't want to do it. It reflects that they have a manager in that clinic that schedules 30 patients for the day, and that they have 15 minutes to see each of them. And then they have to document and click a lot of things in the computer to fulfill metrics, and then call patients to give them results and refill things in the pharmacy. And this happened in a period of time that you would like to be able to, extend, but there are no more hours in the day. So I have my doubts on how we will fix this, because even you may have motivated healthcare workers, if the other side of the system, right, the administration doesn't get the point that we are not producing, bottles or whatever, that we are really treating
Widgets,
human beings. Yes, and that not every appointment will last 15 minutes. Some of them may last 10 minutes because it's a healthy person that comes to say hello and have the checkup and the end. But when you have complex patients, and they don't necessarily need to be elderly, I don't want to be biased.
Right.
They may be a 30, 40-year-old lady with cancer or with diabetes that already had a stroke or going through a divorce, right, and very depressed or with suicidal ideas. So especially in primary care, internal medicine, we see this variety of patients, and we don't know. Just checking on the age of that patient, you will not know what is coming. and trying to put everybody in this, range of 15 minutes is enough. I believe that we are getting very short, sadly. And what happens is that you are not building this good relationship, this appropriate relationship with your patients, where you can learn more about the social aspects and emotional aspects of their lives. Someone will not come today for first time and tell you, oh, I went through a divorce, or my dog is sick, and I am living in a place that is not safe, and I cannot go and buy good food because I don't have the money. I'm working in 3 places. They will try to give you the I have pain here, I'm pain there,
Right.
and I have this black spot here, and right. So this takes time, and we don't have it, sadly. And for me personally, is heartbreaking, very disappointed, and the reason number one for me, personally, and for many doctors and healthcare professionals, to develop burnout, because there is a very big gap between what we want to do, what we thought medicine should be, and what we are doing every day.
Right.
And that's part of that's part of the diagnosis, isn't it? Isn't like, what's causing this pain? Well, it could be the fact that they're working 2 jobs and they're not sleeping and all those things. And you don't have time to talk about that. You can treat the symptom, but you're not treating the cause. And
Exactly.
and does that all come down to money in the long run, because we don't have enough time and staff, and what is that where it's stemming from? Because it seems like everything does.
Yes, it's a very interesting question. The quick answer could be yes, probably is because administrators and CEOs of healthcare systems have zero knowledge in medicine. They are not doctors or nurses, or they never went to medical school. So they don't know what happened in the operation room. They don't know what happened in a room when you see a patient and you have to tell them that they have HIV or they have cancer. And you cannot do that in 15 minutes and think that life continues like nothing, because we as human beings, we have feelings too, and then we have to go to the next room, right? And give a, hey, you are pregnant. So I don't think that they have any idea of what happened inside, and I will recommend any CEO to please take a few minutes, get the scraps, and go into these rooms and get humanized, because I feel like that is missing. That's number one. Number two, I have my doubts that they understand really the industry of medicine, because if they will really pay attention to what medicine is about and the benefits of creating a good relationship with patients, that not only increase the probability of that patient will come back and again to you because they like you and they trust you, they will recommend more family members and friends. So that's good business. And number one. Number two is that if they trust you, they will follow your advice, meaning that they will recover easily from the medical conditions that they have. And if you are talking about prevention, they will prevent, right? They will be compliant in anything that is related to prevention. So you will be reducing cost, you will be reducing risk of disability, you will reduce medical or admissions, visits to the emergency. So the cost of the healthcare system and
will
the
go
cost
down.
of Medicare, Medicaid, right, will go down, and you will have happy, healthy people that also is producing better in their jobs. So I see this like counterproductive. It's like, how is that you are really avoiding physicians to do their job correctly so they can bring more money to the healthcare system, to the country, and I just don't get it, and I have been trying to understand. I don't.
But I
Forget
think
about the
Doesn't make
emotional
sense.
aspect. Forget about being kind. Forget about the emotional aspect. I'm not even trying. The humanistic part, I am separating it. I'm just
Right.
talking about money. I don't
money,
get
yes. But I think it's, it really comes from a corporate mentality, and it becomes, it's really down to ledgers and when you've got stockholders and people that are so far removed from the actual business itself that it just becomes an accounting, and how can you get the most and the fastest, and from everything I've read in my research over the last year, what is the most expensive part of any business are your employees, right? So employees are the most expensive. So where are they going to make their first cuts is with employees. So, and they're going to try to get the most out of each employee that they have. So without, and forgetting that these are human beings and not widgets and not machines, and if you burn out, well, then they'll hire someone else because there's plenty, there's a pool to pick from.
But again, that's a very poor understanding of the process, because first of all, a physician or a nurse that is tired, upset, not only will treat bad patients, so you will have less satisfaction, which is some of the wonderful metrics that we are supposed to measure, right, in the hospitals. So you will have less patient satisfaction. Patients will not like to be admitted again in that hospital. They will not recommend that hospital or that clinic. So not good for the business. Then you have more risk of medical errors, that this come with suits, right? That's a lot of money too, and very bad advertisement. and last but not least, if you have a physician or a nurse that quit their job, right, or that collapse in front of you, and you decide that it's not useful at that point, what you have to do is to recruit. And recruitment and retraining is so expensive that it's not worth it. So again, I can go back to all this, removing the emotional aspect, just to money, and you try to get the numbers, and it doesn't make sense. I don't get it.
But you touched on something important, which is, that the cost of training and recruitment, is not something to ignore. And I think because of that, this is why, and I'm going to, turn it back into long-term care and nursing homes, things like that, acute centers, because there's a lot of people working that aren't trained now, because they're just putting them through, the cursory training just to have bodies in there, basically, which is, and I'm speaking not technically, but I'm just saying this is what I've seen, and this is why our system is it's not only broken, it's frightening, because the huge decisions are made by people that are not qualified.
Absolutely, and not only that you don't have enough staff, but the staff is very low motivated and very inappropriately trained. Yes, we are rushing trainees, and we are getting people that is not prepared. I am very respectful with what sadly we call providers, that is this pool of a lot of different professionals put all together under that same, so you have nurse practitioners and PAs and etc. But even I am very respectful, and I have very good friends that are PAs and nurse practitioners, and I know the value that they represent, and the amazing knowledge and how much they care about patients, but they are excellent PAs, they are excellent nurse practitioners, right? They're excellent doctors, but you cannot do the job of others. And they are trying to replace and give responsibilities at a level that does not represent your training. And that's not appropriate for patients, and that's not appropriate for the same individual that decided that wants to be a PA or a nurse practitioner and feels comfortable with that role, but is not prepared to the responsibility that another role will, force them to. So that's a big problem. And of course, it's less expensive to hire people with less training, right? Than to hire a physician. But that's part of what is happening right now, and I feel bad for them because of the level of stress. It's like dealing with sick patients, long-term patients, comes with an emotional distress and the fear of doing something wrong when you don't have someone there that you can, because they supposedly should have someone available to also discuss the cases and feel that they are doing things correctly. And I heard many of these nurse practitioners and PAs saying that it's like, we love what we do, we want to help, but we know our limitations. And so it's not me as a physician judging or underestimating the value of others. It's respecting that they have the right to work under their scope, because that's what is safe for them and that's what they want to do.
Right, and it's like,
and it's not happening.
I saw that firsthand in my own experience, where a nurse who was not ready to take on a floor by herself was there all by herself and made a horrific mistake. And she was so overwhelmed that my heart broke for her. But it was to my mom. So here I am stuck in the middle, like you were put on this situation, and I feel sorry for you. But I feel sorrier for my mom. I don't know. Everybody's is a victim in this bad situation.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. We are all victims. Sadly, this is something that majority of individuals are not aware of. They see the nurse practitioner, doctor, any of us health professionals as the monsters on the, on this picture. And you don't want to give me this order. You don't want to send me to that doctor. You don't want to prescribe that. You don't want to be with me. You care more about your computer. That's how it looks, really. I will not say that that's not correct, because when I remove myself from the white coat and I am the mom or the wife or the daughter of someone,
or the patient,
and I have to, or the patient, right? And I have to experiment the healthcare system. I am like, this is how it looks. And the other day I went to see a physician as a family member, and I almost hugged him. It's like, may I hug you? I am impressed. You were so kind. Your staff is so kind. And I was like looking like a crazy person, like, enjoying the fact that I'm seeing normal. It's normal.
I literally hugged the speech therapist. I hugged the speech therapist that came to assess my mom the day, and I think she looked at me like I was crazy. But it was like, finally I had somebody that was a human being, right? That I felt like it was like listening to me and like and validating what I was trying to get across. But
that was your perception, Susie, right? You thought that you were seeing finally a human being. You were in front of human beings all the time. They were so stressed, in survival mode, terrified of the next possibility of having an error. Already abused, already abused by their bosses, no leaders, bosses, and also abused many times by the patients that are frustrated, scared, and that they are seeing just half of the story, right? They don't know the behind the scenes.
What you're talking about is moral injury, because I hear this a lot, right?
Yes.
The term, okay. And I think that it's really important that you're bringing this up, because we as a patient, and we're not in the medical, anybody that's not in the medical field at all, we don't know. So the only people we are interfacing with are those doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners and PAs. And so we really do, because we don't know, now I know, but before, if you don't know, you really feel like it's coming from them and that they could do better. But now, but we need to tell people that they can't do better. And that's why things have to change, right?
Well, also our expectations are when, as the patient or the family of the patient, you see somebody in the uniform and you immediately think they know exactly what they're doing. They are educated. They know exactly, they can solve a problem just because you ask them. And it's not the case. And like Susie said, she had no idea until she went through it. And I think that's probably 98.7% of the people who are going to go through this just think that, oh, there's a nurse, they've got that uniform on, they must know, they can solve my problem, and it's not the case, and it's
the time that we spend trying to convince a person on the other side of the phone that my patient needs an MRI, not the X-ray, that needs to be normal, so I can do the CT, so then I can do the MRI. When I know that everything will happen, will be normal, I will take 3 months to get to the MRI if I am lucky. I don't need the other ones. I just need, please, the MRI. Don't spend money and time in 2 tests that I know will be normal. And
right.
You will think that coming from someone, right, graduated from medical school, that concept should be so easy, right? And
right.
That's an easy task, a normal task. It's impossible.
Right.
It's impossible.
Because
the same with medication.
Right. Because the boxes need to be checked off, and those boxes, equate to money. And they equate to money because if they can charge for another X-ray and they can charge for another, CT scan, and all you want is an MRI, well, no, then you're going to cut those 2 steps out, and that's money. So I have a question in that respect. So if you, as providers, to throw a net over all of you, very nuanced, skilled physicians, what if you were transparent and just said, I want to work with you more. I would like to spend more than 15 minutes, but this is the system. I just want you to know that. And if everybody heard that from their provider, so that they got a sense of like, it's not my doctor, it's above the doctor. I mean, I think that maybe the doctors can be more transparent, or does that put their jobs in jeopardy? Yes, it does.
Retaliation, for sure, retaliation, that's clear. The fear inside of the system is unbelievable, and the bystanders, right? It's impossible to believe. It's surprising. It's very depressing, actually, to see how much people is ready to tolerate to keep their jobs. And I understand why also. Because if you have kids at home, if you bought recently a house, if you have parents that are elderly and you need to take care of them, I get it.
You have no choice. You have no choice.
And you have non-competes. And I don't know if you are aware of non-competes. Non-competes are things that you sign in your contract that really limit your ability to find a second job, right? If you quit your job, you depending on your specialty and the type of non-compete, you may need to move from not only your city, but the state to practice for X amount of years in another state. So you can be a doctor and earn some money, and then 2 years later or 1.5 years later, you can come back and reunite with your family where you are.
That makes me so angry, because it's very frustrating to hear that, because it seems like they've created a system so that it does shackle, for lack of a better word, it shackles everybody's to do their job in a really profound way. So if they can do that, if they can create that kind of a platform, why can't we do that in the way that it works. It's because when I talk to people who are professionals, they say, "Oh, it's so broken, it's so convoluted, it's such a web. You can't, we can't pull it apart. We can't, there's just too many pieces." Well, there's always too many pieces. They seem, there's a system in place that keeps everybody staying in this system, so that there is a way to change it, don't you think?
I want to think that yes, because the other option is I have to quit medicine, and that's something that I'm not doing.
Right.
I love medicine, and I refuse to think that I will be miserable doing what I love. So yes, has to be a way. The exactly way I don't know it, but I can tell you something is. In big part, what you are doing with your documentary could be, a stone that is building in that direction.
Right.
We need to create awareness. We need to remove the curtains and allow patients to be empowered and to understand that they are, I don't like the word victim, but I will use it in this context, that they are victims the same that we are victims of a broken system, that we are in the same side, and that we are supposed to collaborate. So reducing a little the stress that healthcare workers are receiving from patients, the mistreatment from patients, and it's ridiculous, but when you will imagine that a doctor will get hurt by a patient, this is except that it's a psychiatrist patient, but those things are happening. You are insulted. I have been insulted by patients so many times because I'm saying I cannot give you that referral, or I will not prescribe you an antibiotic that you don't need.
You know what?
Because the insurance won't cover, or whatever.
But
and that's what's so counterintuitive about all of this, is that if the system was running properly, everyone, including the insurance companies, they're paying out less. They're paying out less claims.
That's what she said. That's what MIRIAM was saying.
Yeah. It's insane.
And
it's also a little frightening. Yeah, go ahead, Suze.
No, I was just going to say that the people that it feel, the way you're framing that, it is supply and demand, right? That's business at the end of the day. That's the simple version. It's supply and demand. So we are as patients, we're in demand, because without us, they're not going to make money.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So we in essence, as a population of patients, right, we have power, because if we demand it as a population, and we say, well, we're not going to go here to you, we're going to go to the places that provide us what we need, instead of just accepting it, instead of going, oh, this is the system, this is what we have to work within. No, we pay the checks.
Well, I will tell you something. I see doctors, including myself, kind of as a restaurant, a waitress in a restaurant, or the cooker. You pay the owner of the restaurant, because I don't get the money in the hospital either, right? And I am supposed to give you this delicious food that you will enjoy and you will live happy. You cannot give me a tip. That is illegal in this country, right? But you will. Doctors, we cannot receive anything, of course, but that's more or less the relationship. Physicians, we are supposed to be servant leaders, right, in the community. We are physicians, nurses, and the complete team, right? We are supposed to serve the patients. The patients have the right, and they should have the right to select who is the doctor, what facility they go to, who will see them or not. But that doesn't happen. Who decides all that is your insurance. You cannot pick up, and then you go inside of the hospital and you have to see this gastroenterologist because that's the person that the insurance says, and you're like, I hate that person. Yes, but if not, you will have to pay this amount. So there is not transparency in the process. There is not really democracy in the process of health, if you want to call it like that, where you can select, and therefore your rights are diluted, because it doesn't matter how much you will have, how big is your tantrum, but if your the doctor that you want cannot see you, or will bill you without insurance, your hands are tied. So that's what makes complex the situation.
Totally. And you know what it does? It brings us back. It just makes me think about our metaphor from the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, because we need to pull, because behind the curtain is this ridiculously disgusting human being who's back there, you know, who's just a poser. And he's back there being, oh, you know, the big brand that everyone's afraid of, and they think that this is the way it is. And then, you know, Toto pulls the curtain back, and we see it's just this really fumbling, bumbling man. And now we've blown the cover. Well, we need to blow the cover, and we have the power to do that. We just can't be afraid, and we have to do it, because that's really what it is. And they're in such a they've created such an illusion that we have no power, but we do.
In theory, you should have the power, and physicians and healthcare workers should have the power also to practice medicine in the way that they promise they will be, and that is patients' safety and
Right.
beneficence, and you know, all the list of these ethical concepts that are should be priority. And a big part of I will not say is the solution, but I feel like we need to start with healing. We need to start with self-awareness. We need to start being aware, right, of what is happening.
Right.
The community needs to learn, physicians, nurses, and etc. We need to learn what is happening. We need to understand what is happening behind the scenes. And knowledge gives you power. If you understand that this is not the only way, that there are better ways or different ways. So for that, probably medicine only as a training is getting short. Right now,
Right.
you need to train physician leaders, nurses leaders, right? You need to provide education in emotional intelligence, leadership skills, self-care, to create a strong human beings, leaders, that will be using the white coat and the stethoscope and will act as healthcare workers, but that they have enough knowledge to be able to understand the situation and to maintain their own well-being, so they can keep going and they can keep helping the community and raising their voices and helping themselves and their teams. Because right now, majority of us, I mean, just based on statistics, you have more than 60%, 65% of physicians being burnout, right? And you can change the name or a injury, whatever you want, but they are not in a situation. If they will be pilots driving a plane,
Yep.
they will not be driving that plane.
Right.
Because burnout means that they have
Error.
risk of error, right? That they are
That's
not
right.
able to concentrate, that they are tired, that they
That's
cannot
right.
focus, and that they are not motivated. You
That's
will
right.
not like that pilot to drive your plane,
No.
but they are doing neurosurgeries.
Right. And the suicide rate is
Terrible.
sky high, right?
So
In the-
300 to 400 per year, as per data. What is terrifying is that these numbers are before COVID. So probably we will get numbers that are worse now. And I clarify that because many have been trying to say, well, this is because COVID, and they were, no. This is not because COVID. This is because moral injury, right? And because of this gap between what we want to do and what are we doing. And it's terrifying because you are talking about 1 to 2 physicians dying every day in this country by suicide, and then you have nurses and other healthcare professionals, so and their numbers are not necessarily better, and
This is a
really
disaster.
worrisome.
It's a disaster because if
Yeah.
we don't have, as it is, we're not providing, the environment for doctors and nurses and providers to do what they do. And then on top of it, so they're either burning out and leaving the industry because they can't stay in it. And I've talked to a lot of doctors that are doing that, or they're taking their own lives, which is so tragic. But then, as patients, as human beings that need doctors, we're creating such a horrible crisis But that's a whole nother. Okay, I just feel like I have to talk about your book, and I want to because this is getting so incredible.
No, but this is so connected. But this is so
It is
connected.
It is connected.
It is
but
connected.
But I want to hear about the 3G cycle, because I think, and I don't want to give it short shrift. But because this is Love Conquers Alz, I want to ask you one thing about in terms of geriatrics and that that focus and how we as caregivers of someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, and I know in my community I hear it a lot that there's not enough information from the doctors that we go to, and how can we create, I mean, again, a big problem, but how can we at the moment help ourselves, help our loved ones, or if we're diagnosed with early onset or whatever, there's not enough people that understand it, and that's why they are given short shrift, because there's not an understanding of it.
Well, Alzheimer's is a disease, a condition that sadly is very frequent in elderly population, more than what we would like. But at the same time, even we may be able to do a correct diagnosis at some point, clinically or now with more sophisticated tests. The treatment is the part that we really don't know. Right now we are seeing this controversy about a new medication that FDA is approving or already approved, and many individuals in the scientific world are questioning the type of studies, and I feel like that's the big problem. We really, even we can diagnose, we cannot treat, and that's very frustrating for the patient, especially for the family, and for us physicians too. It's very important also for those that maybe are not so used to the term Alzheimer and dementia to understand that dementia is a big ball that contains Alzheimer, and that there are other type of dementia, right? Because sometimes we think that it's the same. It's not the same. No. The clinical presentation is different. The progress of the disease is different, and sadly we don't have medication for the other ones either. So that's again a big problem. Right now, the only thing that we have really is the support of the family members and the support of this multidisciplinary team. Yes, to help the patient and the family. It's very hard to find that again in a system that is broken, where you have a psychologist and a social worker and a physical therapist and the psychiatrist and geriatrician working together in order to get the patient to have the best quality of life. That's very complex when you have a system that doesn't support that.
It doesn't support that. And I think what you said in the very beginning about taking into account the whole person. So when you have a misunderstanding of Alzheimer's, and as the physician not having the time to be able to take into account that, yes, it shows up in different ways in different people. Yes, there are similarities, but one case is not every case. That's just the way it goes. So, and because there's no treatment, we as a physician, as physicians, as the team, everyone needs to know that, understand it better rather than dismissing it. I mean, I spoke to a professional who is very respected, on a high level. Yesterday I was interviewing him, and he basically said, well, I understand my grandma had Alzheimer's for 10 years and it was like she was dead already. But that isn't true. That is such a bias and such a stereotype to lump everybody, and to say that they're not worthy or they're not alive. They're basically, so that understanding is just, my heart was pounding yesterday.
I can imagine. Because I feel it in different ways, right? I feel it like the granddaughter and the daughter of someone that had dementia. and I feel it like the doctor that decided to study geriatrics in Peru and came to this country and train again in geriatrics. And I didn't do this because I think that elderly, they don't deserve a good treatment or they don't deserve to be respected. I did it because I believe that even until your last day, you deserve to be treated as a human being that you are. How many times we see these ladies or gentlemen that, yes, they may look like they are not there, and maybe they are not. It's hard for us really to say that they can understand or not. We really don't know. Each case is different, as Susie was saying. But if you go back on the story, they created something, or they wrote a book, or they have a street with their name because they save lives. We cannot forget the past of these individuals. We cannot forget that these individuals are our future. Tomorrow we will be them. Tomorrow we could be them. So we need to train the society, educate the society, educate our kids in a way where they are kind and respectful with those in need, with those that are frail, because tomorrow we will depend on the kindness of this new generation. They will be the ones that are watching for us. And is that the way that we want to be referred as, like we are dead, we are a chair, I feel like it's a very non-humanistic approach. And what happens is that when we remove the human aspect of individuals, when we give them the title of providers instead of Dr. this, nurse that, right? Patient number 45. So when we do that, we do it to remove, right, the concept of human. Yes.
That's right.
And that's easier to treat bad someone that is not a human.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Exactly.
That gives you less guilt.
And this starts with education, and it starts with we have to educate from a very young age, not only the doctors. Doctors don't even know. We need to teach our children. We need to we don't avoid it. We have to explain what's going on. We have to
demystify it and destigmatize.
They're still human beings. They're just different. They're like Susie always says. You can communicate with a baby. They can't speak, but they can understand, and you can do it. And I'm not saying that they're babies, but you have to learn a new way.
Well, it's just that they've lost skills. They've lost a certain level of their brain, but there's other parts of their brain that are working, and so and they're very and it's meaningful because to the day my mom died, even without when she started to lose her speech, she was still speaking. And even in a different way, you tune into them, and you can. My mom would laugh, she'd cry, she'd swoon, she'd kiss, because those are emotions, those are feelings, those are instinctual. Those will never go away. They're there.
Yeah, and again, we need to treat people the same way. I mean, my husband and I will repeat that at home all the time to our kids. We need to treat people the way that we want to be treated, right? And we need to lead by example. I see my mom today going through this, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that she took her mom to our house when I was in medical school. She moved her, so she was living with us, and my mom took care of her mom with dementia until the last day. And my sister and I, we were part of this process. It was a family, a family commitment that they are, my Boberosa was my best friend, and we loved her until the last day. And my kids that never met her, they talk about my Bobe Rosa, my grandma Rosa, and they know that about her, and they love her. And there is nothing wrong about having feelings. There is nothing wrong about going through the sad process and the grief, especially when you know that you are doing your best, that you are trying your best and being respectful and kind. The other, we can question and we can, be respectful and open-minded with those that believe that, yes, they can hear us, they cannot hear us. It sometimes will be, challenges in proof that one thing or the other, except that we do neuro tests and with the images and etc. But beyond that, that person is still a person, is still your mom or your dad or your friend. And now is when you show how much you love someone. In parties, in celebrations, in good times, it's very easy to be there or to be surrounded by a lot of people. The question is, who is with you when you are in your most vulnerable stage?
Absolutely. Amen.
And that's
But how do
important.
you as a physician, because you have 40 patients and you don't, how do you, especially with somebody with Alzheimer's, how do you get to know them enough that you spot things like Susie saw things in her mom that the nurses, the doctors would never know in a million years how she was doing? How do you do that? Because you don't have the time. You don't. I mean, how do you get past that?
Well, I will refuse to see 40 patients. If someone wants to hire me to see 40 patients, I mean, believe me, the answer is no. I will not do it. It goes against my ethics and my values. So no way. But even when you have a reasonable amount of patients, right, that allows you to stay 1 hour with the patient and know them for a long time, you will not know that person as much as the family member. And that's why one of the most important members of the multidisciplinary team is the patient and the family.
Yeah.
And we cannot ignore that. And when you see a geriatrician talking about multidisciplinary or holistic or comprehensive approach, you will see the nurse and the doctor and the physical therapist and the clerk and a lot. And you will see that in the middle, in the center of this group, is the face of the patient and the family behind them. Why? Because at the end, you need to adapt your therapy to the patient. The patient is the one that is asking, I want fish
Right.
with this sauce and whatever, right? You need to adapt yourself to what the
Right.
patient feels and wants.
But it's such a struggle because Susie, would tell them, no, you don't understand. This is what she's doing. And they're just like, they kind of go by the book as opposed to by listening to the family member when they know. That's a problem, and
But
it's
it
a
is the
struggle. It's what Susie went through the entire time.
And that's a very big problem, and I would like to tell you that this is one case in a million, and sadly it's not one case in a million. We are living in compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue. You have people working just because they have to, surviving day by day. This doesn't, I want to clarify that I don't think that this justify mistreatment or lack of respect or medical errors. No, it just explain why this
Why
happens.
it's happening,
But,
yes.
Yeah, but doesn't justify it, right? This should
Right.
never happen. But you have, and then you have individuals that are not well trained. Remember something: there are not many geriatricians in this country. Many of them, they don't want to even go there because there are no jobs for geriatricians, because there are no geriatric centers, because there is if you want to work in a hospital, there are not even geriatric doctors to do consultations, because that goes against the metrics of the hospital. A patient will have to stay longer because needs physical therapy and needs evaluation of this and that mess up the metrics.
Mm-hmm.
No,
It's not cost
yeah, geriatricians, we work. I have to admit, and breaks my heart, that I have to work as an internist, a little more sophisticated internist, but that's my role in this country, because except that you go to specific places, you cannot work as a geriatrician. I apply what I learned in geriatrics for young people too, right? But there is not a way to do geriatrics. And as a result, you have a lot of geriatricians that are not geriatricians, that they were trained in places that are not preparing them to be geriatric doctors, because there is no opportunity.
There's no opportunity. That's so sad. Well, on that note, let's talk about the 3G. Let's talk about your book, which isn't sad. It's the 3G cycle of life, the secrets up for achieving joy, meaning, and well-being, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, tell us because I want everyone to go out and get your book, which is, it is totally charting, as they say, on the charts on Amazon, and so congratulations.
Thank you.
But give us the gist of the 3Gs, what it stands for, and how you came up with it, and why everyone should read it.
So the 3G is the result of me fighting burnout and trying to find my purpose again, and escaping the dark hole of the system plus COVID. And I have been very resilient all my life, and people used to ask me how, and I never pay attention to that. I thought that it's so normal, and that's how I am. During COVID and with everything that was happening in my life, I was not able to leave this to good luck, right? I was supposed to understand what is happening, how I do it, how I replicate this, and get the help that I needed to make sure that those around me will be okay too. And that's how I came with the 3G. I believe I function thinking that life is kind of a video game. I go level after level, and I don't think that I die. I see a lot of other, hearts in the game that give me extra life, and I learn the new tricks, and I adapt, and I try again and again till I am able to, get more savvy and go to pass the level and go to the next level. So that's the concept of the 3G cycle, is life as cycles, one after the other, and the components for the cycle are the components that I found that are keeping me alive and directed. And they are, first of all, goal. I start every process thinking about what is my goal, what do I want to achieve, and could be something mandatory, finish medical school or get married or have kids, whatever society forces you to do, but could be write a book or go to Italy, something that could be a dream. And then to be able to continue through the cycle, I need energy, this fuel, right, that I call grit, which is a second G, goal, grit. And sometimes comes from inside myself, and sometimes it's people cheering me up, like, you can do it, right, which is also very important and needed. And you will see that at the end of the cycle, you will achieve your goal and you will close with a second, right? With that G from goal. But the truth is that majority of the times in life, we don't achieve our goals, or not the way that we expected or the way that we wanted. And many times what happened is that we change our mind, and that red Ferrari that was important when we were 15 is not so important when you are 40 and you have to take your kids to soccer, right? And you need a van. So we may adapt even our goals, and that doesn't mean that we are failing. It's just that we are growing and we are learning something new and we are developing new skills, and that's the last G from the 3G cycle, growth. So goal, grit, growth. And I use that perspective to navigate different catalysts in life that could accelerate the process to achieve our goals, or that could, make us go challenge after challenge. And I was very lucky to interview more than 30 amazing individuals, from medical students to lawyers, Buddhist monks, Wall Street people, professional athletes, and 4 continents involved. And they were sharing their stories of challenges and their opportunity to grow after adversity. And they were sharing also their knowledge and explaining different techniques that they use, that after I investigate them, I back up in the book with some evidence, scientific evidence to explain why they work and why they could work for you too. And in between, I have some of my own stories and stories from my family and my kids and my husband, and I added some art that my kids created for me, so they feel part of the combination. And this is a family. This started as a very lonely journey and ended being a collective journey where I have family members and friends and colleagues and mentors involved.
It's I can't think of, I was trying to see if I could remember it, but I posted this quote about, when you're taken off your path and from something, difficult, something very difficult, and we think that we are taken off our path and we're mourning that loss as well, and then you lean into it like anything else. When you lean into something that's difficult, then you realize that it's actually the gift, because it's brought you to a different path that you belong. And so if you can look at the other as not being a loss but as a door, then you can only win. You can only win.
And that comes from, and talking about science, right? What's the science behind this concept? If you think about positive psychology, and they have a concept that is called post-traumatic growth. Normally we talk about resilience. In resilience, you bounce back. So you go in life, this is your baseline, something bad happened to you, and then you go back to your normal. Or if that's not the case, you succumb and you have, depression, post-traumatic stress, suicides. Post-traumatic growth takes resilience to a different level. You get to your baseline, but then you learn from the adversity. You use adversity in your favor. So you don't stay here, but actually you progress. You go to a next level. And what is wonderful about that, and this is perfect, I could use you, Susie, as a perfect example, right? You went through the adversity with your mom, you saw so many things happening, you were able to decide to be cranky and upset and get your tantrum and maybe get depressed or whatever, or you decided to probably go through it also, right? Like, we are humans, we have to go through the process.
Yeah.
But then you went back, and you could stay in your baseline, you could be just resilient, but you decided to not. I will not stay here. I will use everything that I learned. I will use even the pain in my favor. And now I will grow, and I will do something that is the typical, what happened with people that grow. I will help my community. I will do something.
Pay it forward. Yeah, pay forward.
And those stories are so inspiring, because you don't need superpower for this, right? You don't need to be Supergirl or whatever. You just need to be a human being with, a clear purpose and in life, and to keep going, and to accept also the help of those that are surrounding you, because we don't grow by ourselves. We grow with others supporting us. And that's what I want to inspire with the book, that we are not victims of our lives, that we cannot live our life complaining of what happened to us. We need to use the things that happen to us in our favor, and we need to keep going, and we need to keep growing.
Yeah.
Right? And
Totally. I mean, I feel like everything that you say has one big giant theme, which is the theme of our show, which is love. It all comes from love, right, Dawn? Because we always say this.
And you know why?
Why?
We do say this, that love is powerful, love is contagious, and love conquers alls. This was an amazing time.
And this, it really does.
Today.
Listen, look at her. Yeah.
It does. And we have so much more we didn't cover, and we'll do that again another time. But we hope everyone enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, share, and please, if you can, check out what we're doing with No Country for Old People. We do need financial support. We're not proud. We're going to say it. We do. And it's all tax deductible, 100%. And if you feel you want to be part of this movement, please
donate whatever you can. We'll have it in the show notes, and we'll have all of Dr. Z's information in the show notes, and how you can reach her and how you can get her great book. And we love you, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
All you gotta